why, like, what is a sperm? What is an egg cell? Why do we need these? Why is that necessary for sexual reproduction? It's not what bacteria do. Bacteria just like cozy up next to each other and like this little proddy thing out, and they're like, hey, have some DNA, and like, hey, thanks for the DNA, here's some for you. And that's like bacteria sex, but that's not what human sex and animal sex is like. It's fundamentally different. We have these cells called ova and sperm, and we like, you know, like whatever, you put one body part inside of another body part, and we don't say here's some DNA, we say here's some cells, they have DNA in them, and then what happens? Does it make you uncomfortable? So I'm married to a midwife, so I'm a little bit more frank discussing these things than maybe people are comfortable with, but you, sorry? What'd you say? No, I'm curious now. What'd you say? That's good. I like that. That's good. I don't normally go for puns, but I enjoyed that. Yeah, that's a good one. I support that. So Henry, talk to me. Why do we have sperm and eggs? Henry, I'm so curious. Why do we have sperm and eggs? What's the purpose of them? Okay, but why? But like, oh, we're not over. Okay, listen. Shh. We'll get into the fact that we're not remotely over. I mean, whatever. Just to be clear, we're about 20 years away from massive and stark population decrease, not increase. Anyway, that's a different discussion that we'll have at a later date. In the meantime, but like, why that specific cell? Why not? I don't know, skin cell. Okay, we said skin cells getting damaged by like UV radiation all the time, so that'd be a bad idea because we'd have lots of like mutant kids, and we don't want that. Yeah, talk to the period 4 class, and I'll show you mutant kids. Am I recording this? I should not have said that. To everyone in Mr. Laschuk's 4th period class, I didn't mean you. I meant everyone around you. But anyway, but no, like, but why not one of those stem cells? Why not stem cell from mom, stem cell from dad, put them together, new cell, now we have a new baby, go off, be a human. What's the problem? But why not? Like, stem cells can become any kind of cell. So why not just join them up and say, okay, stem cell from mom, stem cell from dad, now we have like super stem cell, sex stem cell, great, off we go, and now we have a baby. Right? And like, why do men have a different sex cell than women? Like, why? Like, why not just everyone produces? Sure, but like, so are plants. Plants have also male and plants have male and female sex cells as well. Like, they have male sex parts and female sex parts as well, right? Like the flower is the sex organ of a plant, right? And like the stamen and the pistil, right? And the pistil is the male sex organ, and the stamen is the female sex organ, right? Like, plants also reproduce sexually, and they also have like biologically sexed organs. Now, as it happens, they all have both. Some humans have both too. Most don't. But all the same, why? Sure, 100%. And what's that mean? Because like when because I'm just picturing like how I fertilize my garden, and I think, well, that doesn't happen. No, don't. Yeah, no. You heard it here, guys. No. So, yeah. So, but what's it mean to fertilize it? That's okay, because like, because like, this isn't something, like, I think all this stuff should be in the grade 9 science curriculum. I don't know why we don't have a lot of conversation. Like, I think you should know how your sex organs work. I think that's pretty important stuff.
Babies at 15.
Yeah, so you don't have babies at 15, but also so like you understand like how to prevent having babies at 15, but also like so you understand when you do decide to have babies, if you decide to have babies, what's happening in your body, right? And also like, you don't want to have a baby at 15, but your body, for most people, I think the average age of like entering puberty now in Canada is like 12 and a half. It's been steadily going down for years. So most of your bodies are at the stage where they're doing the work to make babies if you're ready to, right? So that's something to understand that's happening in your body right now. So why can't it just be a stem cell from each? How many chromosomes do you have?
46.
46, okay. Now, if I take one of my stem cells with 46 chromosomes, and I combine it with my wife's stem cells that have 46 chromosomes, and now we've just made a baby by mashing those two cells together. How many chromosomes does that cell have? 92. Okay, great. So they grow up to be a successful, I don't know, litigant lawyer, and they live in New York City and whatever, and they meet the love of their life, and they take one of those stem cells that now has 96 chromosomes, and presumably their partner also is the product of two parents, so they have 96 chromosomes. They put them together. How many chromosomes does baby have now?
A lot.
Something like that. I think it's 192, but lots, right? Like we're talking a lot of... What's the problem here? Is this sustainable?
That's too many.
No, right? Because, so what's going on? When we say you have 46 chromosomes, what's that mean? Because you got half of your chromosomes from your father, and you got half your chromosomes from your mother. Yeah. So how's that work? Does that mean, like, how do they decide? Like, do they sit down and say, like, okay, is this something nobody ever told you about sex? That, like, before you're going to have a baby, you have to sit down and say, like, okay, chromosome 1, I got that covered. But, like, Brett, like, you're going to take care of chromosomes 2 and 3, and I'll take 4 and 5. Like, how does the body decide who gives which chromosome?
It just happens.
You ever had that conversation? I don't remember having that conversation.
Isn't it?
I remember having a conversation where my phone rang and my fiance said, hey, I'm pregnant. And I said, hey, I'm about to write a biostats exam. This was really bad timing for this. That's what I remember. But I don't remember sitting down and deciding who would give chromosome 3 to my son, Gregory. I don't remember that conversation. So how's the body decide?
Random chance.
Okay, but how? Because, like, what if they get 2 chromosome 3s but no chromosome 1? That's a problem. Like, what are the odds that random chance, we randomly take half my chromosomes, randomly take half of my wife's chromosomes, and we get the right combination? That seems really low odds. In fact, that'd be a great math problem for you. It's not going to happen, right? It's incredibly, incredibly rough odds that the 23 I happen to skip, or the 23 that she happens to not skip. That's not going to happen. So how does it happen?
Both.
Code into what? So, like, does the father always give, like, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, right? They do odds and evens? No. And here's the other thing. Like, anyone here have a different color hair than either of their parents? My dad's hair is way darker than mine. My mom's hair is lighter than mine. I don't have my mom's hair, and I don't have my dad's hair. I don't have my mom's nose or my dad's nose. Some traits, it's like very much. Like, I can look at my parents and be like, I see where that came from. But some of my traits don't seem to come from one or the other. I seem to have both. So how's this work? But what's that mean? Okay. But how's that work? Because to come to my grandparent, first it would have had to go to my parent, then to me.
Because even though your parents don't actively display the gene, they're still coded.
But how's that possible? Because my parents all have a nose. They have a different nose from me, but I promise I would notice if I had a Voldemort for a parent.
The gene is just developed.
Right? Right? I would have noticed that. I'd have been like, hey, you know what I never noticed? That mom has no nose. I would have noticed that. So seriously, what's going on here?
You're asking too many questions.
Do you actually know the answer to this, or are you just...
No, I'm just desperately trying to figure out how sex works. Can someone please tell me? No, I do know. So here's what I want to get at, which is that humans kind of have 46 chromosomes. Kind of. Because humans and most eukaryotic organisms, but what I'm going to say is, and all organisms that reproduce sexually, in the way that we do, are diploid. Okay, so there's a word. What's it mean? What it means is that, yeah, you have 46 chromosomes, but what you really have is you have 2 copies of every single gene. In other words, you have 2 of each chromosome. And that's almost perfectly true. We'll talk about there's one little exception in humans, which isn't true for every sexual reproducing organism, but it is true for humans. So you have 2 copies of every single gene. And of course, now it makes a little bit of sense. Where do you get the 2 copies of each of your chromosomes? You get one from your dad and one from your mom. So the answer is that the reason your nose isn't necessarily like either of those is because you actually have the blueprint for mom's nose in your cells, and you have the blueprint for dad's nose. And then we'll talk about recessives and dominants and well, now how when you have 2 copies for something, how do your cells decide what to do with that? Because that's an interesting question. Imagine if you went to a building site and there were 2 completely different sets of blueprints and they're like, and build a building. Weird, right? But that's what your body is. It really is. It's 2 sets of blueprints and they say, now build a person. and you're what you get when your cell figures out how to deal with those two blueprints.
Isn't, like, blonde eyes and blue.
So one is maternal, and that's the copy from your biological what?
Mother.
Yeah, very good. From your biological mother. And the other is what? Paternal, right? Do I need to put from father in there? We get it, right? I'm going to say we get it. Now, that should shed a little bit of light of, like, when I make a sperm cell or my wife makes an egg cell, what I need to do is make a cell that doesn't have two copies. Does that make sense? Because again, if I gave two copies and my wife gave two copies, now when we produce a kid, that kid will have how many copies? Two from Eve, two from Mom, that'd be 4. Does that work? No. So, the body needs a process to produce sex cells. And the biological term for a sex cell is a gamete. I'll put that all caps, just like I put it for diploid. Which are cells that only have one copy. Of each chromosome. And so as a result, only have one copy of each gene. And that's what sperm cells and egg cells are. Sperm cells and egg cells are cells that, unlike every other cell in your body, don't have both copies of your chromosomes. They only have one copy. So your skin cells, your eye cells, your blood cells, your bone cells, your hair follicle cells, the stratified squamous epithelial of your large intestine, they all have 46 chromosomes. 1 through 23 from mom, and 1 through 23 from dad. But your sex cells, ova in people who are biologically female, and sperm in people who are biologically male, they don't have two copies of every chromosome. They only have one. And we call these sex cells, or in sort of slightly more formal terms, we call them gametes. So, how do they get produced? Well, it can't just be mitosis, because what do you get when mitosis happens? A direct copy. But when we go to make a gamete, when we go to make a sex cell, we don't want a direct copy. We want a copy that only has half the information. And this is another one of those fascinating engineering problems, because we want half the information, but we also want to make sure that we don't get, 2 copies of chromosome 1, 2 copies of chromosome 3, no copy of chromosome 2 over here. You know what I mean? When we make this cell, we want to make sure that we have only half the chromosomes, but we still have to have one copy of each. We have to have a copy of chromosome 1, we have to have a copy of chromosome 2, because otherwise you'll be missing information. If we're missing information, we can't make a working human being. Does that make sense?
What did the chromosome say when your sister stomped on her toe? Ow, my toe, sis! Did you?
No, listen, don't laugh at that.
Make that review.
I did, yeah.
Oh, you did?
Oh, yeah, no, I did. It's in there.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in there.
We'll print it.
And it was like, it's very much just the kind of skill-based. I didn't make a lot of like very clever word problems.
I didn't look for you.
I did put one, I believe you paid me to do your history homework.
Oh, yes.
You're welcome, by the way.
I laughed at it because it was so.
Don't encourage him. You see,
so bad.
you laugh at him and then he just does it more. Calford with the puns.
So bad.
Can I tell you something about puns? Every person I know who is much smarter than I am really loves puns. So I accept as a premise that means that I'm just not smart enough to find them funny. And I'm not saying that to be like, I get it. Because honestly, every person I know who I'm like, that person is brilliant, they're all constantly making puns. They just don't do anything. I don't get it. I don't see the appeal. I'm like, yes, that word sounds like another word. I don't find that funny. I just don't get it.
Yeah, it was not my.
The only exception is naming things. I think it's fun to give things like for example, every year we name our Christmas tree, and some hits have included Abraham Lincoln, arbor being the French word for tree. Like I thought I like that. We had Chris Pine, we had Spruce Willis, we had Biff Tannenbaum, which is my personal favorite. Anyway. Yes, you do. So now, how's this work? Well, the process by which these cells get made is called meiosis. And today we're going to look at meiosis, but we're going to look at kind of a simplified version of it. And then tomorrow we'll look at a little bit more depth, and I'll give you a little assignment to go to it. The process is called meiosis. Okay. So meiosis is basically mitosis with a twist. All right, so the steps of this should look familiar. So first of all, to understand, this only happens in specific places. So in the case of females, again, your body actually isn't actively undergoing meiosis anywhere in your body. It's already happened. It happened while you were in utero, and some of your stem cells were given the job of undergoing meiosis to produce a bunch of egg cells, which are then stored in your body. And that's it. Your body has no more need for this process. It's already happened for you. For men, for young men, when you've entered puberty, your body began undergoing this process, and that will carry on for the duration of your life. It's called spermatogenesis. It's the process by which sperm get made. So this only happens in key places, unlike mitosis. Every time you get a new cell, that's mitosis. The only exception being when you get a new sex cell, that's meiosis. The truth is, these don't make sperm and egg directly. They make the cells that kind of are then modified to become sperm and egg, but that would be a developmental biology class, which I don't have time to teach you. So we'll kind of simplify. So here we go. Let's talk about the stages of meiosis. So just like in mitosis, before meiosis, the DNA in the parent cell duplicates. So that's before the process even begins. So here we have a cell. We have here, and the truth is these wouldn't have condensed down to chromosomes yet, but just to make it easy to see, let's say we have, and we're going to make this whole thing easy because we're going to pretend that instead of 46 chromosomes, we just have 2. And we're going to say, actually, we're going to be really specific here. This green chromosome, that's the chromosome you got from your mom. And this blue one, that's the chromosome you got from your dad. Does that make sense? We're going to pretend that we only have a chromosome number 1 and that we have 2 copies of it. One from mom, one from dad. And before meiosis begins, these duplicate. What does that look like when they duplicate? Do I have 4 lines here now? 2 of them green, 2 of them blue? Yeah, we make that kind of X pattern, which is exactly what you see under a microscope because the copies are stuck to each other. What do we call the structure that sticks them together? Chromatin is what we call the chromosome when it's uncoiled. So if these looked just like this, which is actually what they would look like before the stage, but it makes it very hard to draw, that is chromatin. Chromatin just coils down to make the chromosomes. Remember the centromere? The little center bit that kind of staples them together? In fact, I could draw a centromere in each one. There we go. Okay, so we would say that this cell is the parent cell. It's diploid, and by convention, that means it has 2 of each chromosome. By convention, we say that it is 2n. In other words, it has double the number of chromosomes it needs. And again, why does it have double? Because one comes from mom and one comes from dad. Good. Now this is still the parent cell, same cell. It's still diploid. All right. This is not now like quatroid. Does that make sense? Because these are still stuck to each other. So this is still just one chromosome. It's just duplicated now. But now duplicated. And now we're going to enter the actual stages of meiosis. And meiosis happens in 2 steps. So we're going to start with what we call meiosis 1. But this should all look very familiar. If we're going to start making 2 cells from 1, what are we going to have to do here? Well, we're going to have to break up the nucleus, right? And we're going to have to form, what are we going to have to form? Because like, I'm not even going to draw or write any words. I'm just going to draw this. What's going to happen? What happens to the nucleus?
Dissolves.
So the nucleus is going to dissolve. And what happens at the poles of the cell? The centrioles form. Very good. I'm going to make a reminder to myself that's called centriole. And what starts to come from the centrioles? Spindle fibers, sometimes also called astral rays, but I like the term spindle fibers better. Astral rays sounds like a Van Morrison record. I like Van Morrison, but anyway. Okay, so these are called spindle fibers. You don't even write, listen, if you know the words, don't even bother writing the label. It's not the important part right now. We want to note, so far, what does this look exactly like? And what stage of mitosis? Nope, prophase. So this is going to be called prophase 1. And we use the Roman numeral 1. Okay, now you know what comes next. What comes next? And what happens in metaphase? So you're right, and this is going to be called metaphase 1. You know what happens in metaphase. What happens in metaphase? We have the centrioles. Those spindle fibers, what will have happened by now? They'll have grown like all over the cell, right? And of course, they actually have to connect to 46 chromosomes. I'm only drawing 2. But where they've attached, where do they attach to the chromosome? At the, what do we call that centerpiece again? The centromere, good. And because they start pulling, where do the chromosomes end up? In the middle. Okay. Do I need to write anything, or are we comfortable with that? That's just like mitosis, right? Okay, now in mitosis, what would happen next? What would happen next if this were just regular old mitosis? Anaphase. So anaphase is going to happen again. Now in mitosis, what happens at anaphase? There's this moment that's very important. So these things are lined up at the center of the cell, and we're pulling, 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 and then what happens? Great, and here's where the difference happens. The chromosomes don't split. Instead, one centromere just wins the tug of war on each side. Does that make sense? In other words, this centriole ends up pulling in this green chromosome here. It gets the copy that was from your mother. Does that make sense? It's chromosome number 1 from your mom. And this centriole, its spindle fibers, pull in the copy that came from your dad. And that's still chromosome number 1. So if that's chromosome number 1, maybe that has the genes that makes your hair. I don't know, maybe it's got the gene that makes, I don't know, your hemoglobin. But now, 2 copies of that. And then, now this is going to undergo what comes after anaphase? Telophase. And so what are these going to do? They're going to split. Which means we're going to get what forming on each side? A nucleus. There we go. And what's going to be inside the nucleus? Well, over here, that green chromosome. And over here, that blue chromosome. Right? And so at the end of meiosis 1, what we end up with is 2 cells. But how is this different from mitosis? In a very key way. An incredibly key way. Very important. Yeah, they're not direct copies at all, because there's a few very, very important differences. The first very important difference is that how many copies of each chromosome does this thing have?
1.
Yeah, now I know that it's got a duplicate stuck to itself, but the point being, we no longer have in this cell chromosome 1 from mom and chromosome 1 from dad. We just have chromosome 1, and it's either from mom or it's from dad. Does that make sense? So this isn't diploid anymore. Any guess what the opposite of diploid is? So this is the daughter cell. But it's what we call haploid. In other words, 1N, and I'm just going to say here really quickly, that means 1 copy of each chromosome. Now this is where this becomes kind of weird. Chromosome. This is where, and I should say daughter cells because we have 2 of them. this is where it gets a little weird, because even though it is only one copy, those copies are still duplicated. So they're still stuck at the centromere to a duplicate. But we don't say that makes them diploid, because they don't have a copy from mom and a copy from dad. They just have a copy from mom that's still photocopied. It hasn't been split in half. Yeah, I'm going to leave this as long as you need it. You tell me when you're done. Why am I sitting? I don't even like sitting. I keep forgetting to charge my computer, so I got to plug it in and my battery's going to die. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Now, are we done? Can this just like grow a tail and go off and be a sperm? Can this just grow a little bigger and go off and be an egg? There's still a problem, which is that do you want your offspring to have a copy of every chromosome from mom and a copy of every chromosome from dad, but also have every one of those chromosomes be stuck to a copy of itself? No. So we have to deal with the fact that this is duplicated. But wait a minute, do we have a process to take a cell that has duplicated DNA and split that in half so that now you get two cells that don't have duplicated DNA? Yeah, that's just mitosis, right? So we went through basically the steps of meiosis once, and now what are we going to do? We're going to go through them all again. Basically do mitosis this time, where this time when anaphase comes, they will split in half. Does that make sense? So these two cells will enter what's called meiosis 2. Do you still need a minute? You still need a minute. Take your time.
Go for it. You were just standing in front of the word.
No, but I want you to take your time. I don't want anyone to feel rushed. This is an important concept. Sam? Sam? Sarah? Will you two shut up?
Sorry.
Stop fighting. God. Okay. So now we'll do meiosis 2. And meiosis 2 basically just means, I feel like this needs one of those, like, have I ever talked about how I love, somewhat ironically, but like the Fast and Furious movies? But what I love most about the Fast and Furious movies is just the names of their sequels. Has anyone watched these movies? Have you seen these stupid things? These are like the heist with cars movies. They're pretty dumb. They're kind of mostly harmless fun, though they're mostly dumb. But anyway, the first one is called Fast and the Furious. And the second one has my second favorite sequel title of all time, because it's called Too Fast, Too Furious. And I've just always thought that that is like, I don't know, I think that's good. And then the third one's called like Tokyo Drift or something. And then they just start getting really lazy. So I think the fourth one is just called Fast and Furious. All they did was took off like the. And then they just, I think now the last one, I think they just called like Furious 9. Like I think they got very lazy with naming, but also didn't have a system. You know what I mean? Like if they just had a system, if they're just like, we're going to call the second one Fast and Furious 2 and the third one Fast and Furious 3, you know, like with some Roman numerals, it's like the Rocky movies. But they tried to get clever, but then they gave up on being clever after Too Fast, Too Furious, which I think we can all admit is pretty clever. Anyway, this could be like To My Tuosis. I don't know. Work on it. Workshop that, okay? Come back to me with something good. We're going to give this a good sequel title. Like Meiosis 2, the return, the comeback. Meiosis Strikes Back. I don't know. Get on it, all right? Don't let me down.
I think instead of you making puns, you're trying to make these
Movie titles. This is what I'm saying.
What about the meiosis?
Just throw a the in? Yeah. You know what? That's pretty good. I think you win. Okay, so now we have these two cells, and what are they going to do? Well, we know what they're going to do. They're going to enter prophase. And sorry, when they enter prophase, what's going to happen? The nucleus is going to dissolve. So both the nuclei dissolve. And then what else is going to happen? Did I do blue on the left? I want to be consistent. I did blue on the right. And I did green on the left, just like my pens. I got a little centromere there. What else forms during prophase? Because this is now the second prophase. So we call it very cleverly 2-pro, 2-phase. The prophase. I really do like that. What else forms? The centrioles, yeah. And what do they begin to grow? Spindle fibers start to grow. Cool. Just like that. And again, we don't really need to add any labels to it. We can just kind of go like that. Okay, after prophase, what do we get? Nope. Yeah, no, you're good. You don't have to be sorry. You didn't like steal my dog. You just switched metaphase and anaphase. Okay, we just fix it. So what's this look like now? That's right. The spindle fibers will connect right to those chromosomes, right? So we got the chromosome here, and we got the blue chromosome there. They're getting massively bigger for some reason. Don't pay any attention to that. I just want you to be able to see them. And yeah, the spindle fibers have connected, right, from the centriole. Somewhere Ms. Middleton is crying and she doesn't know why. I would feel horrible. She's a wonderful human being. If anyone made Miss Middleton cry, that person would immediately become my enemy forever. And you don't want that. All right, what comes after that? So prophase 2, then metaphase 2, then anaphase 2. And of course, this is where we will get anaphase the way it normally happens in mitosis, which is to say what's going to happen here to those duplicated copies. Now they will split apart, right? And so now we'll have our little centrioles, and they'll start to, those spindle fibers will start to shorten. And here we have one copy of the chromosome. A quick one, yeah. Charlie, get in there. I did? I'm sorry. Did I bully you into getting your photo taken? Okay. And then what comes after anaphase? Telophase. And that's where both of these will start to split apart. All right. And what else will form? You'll get the nucleus, right? Like that. All right. And you get a little chromosome in there, a little chromosome in there. A little chromosome in here, got a little chromosome in there. And what's this stage called again? This particular one? I believe you mean the telophase. The telophase. And then after that, what do we end up with? How many cells? 4. Now, interestingly, we get 4 cells, and each of them has what we call that haploid arrangement, which means that each of these only has one copy of each chromosome. Now, again, we've drawn this as if there's only one chromosome to think about. But how many chromosomes do our cells actually have? 23, and then when you double that, you get 46. Does that make sense? 23 unique chromosomes, but 2 copies of each. And all your cells except your sex cells. Now, these are gametes. They are the precursors to sex cells. So in humans, that would be sperm and egg, but of course that would also be seed. It would be spore if you're talking fungus. It'd be the stamen cells. It just depends on what type of species you're talking about. I shouldn't even say egg, because we don't really call ours egg. We call them the ova, ovum singular, ova plural, etc. And when we say precursors, these go on and develop further. So the body would actually have machines whose job is to take these cells and then further develop them into sex cells. Yes?
Oh, sorry, can you please? Yeah.
Behind what? Oh, I thought you said my chest. I was like, oh, I'm sorry. Don't know how that got there. And here I thought it was attached to me the whole time. I have been eating a lot. So that was inappropriate, and I apologize.
Sorry, Mr. Orlando. You're gonna regret my life decisions later.
So glad I record every lesson. It's really good. It's really good.
I'm sorry.
Hey. Hey. No, can I tell you, the side tracks, I mean, that one was just because she said my chest, and I thought she was talking about my memories. But mostly speaking, most of the side tracks, I would say 50% of them are actually planned out, because I do believe that if you just get blasted with science information for 75 minutes straight, I don't know about you, but I find that kind of hard to follow. So I think from time to time, a little bit of like levity and taking your mind off things can be useful. Though you're right, like sorry? Yeah.
No, he doesn't like his first period.
No, I like my first period.
You like the grade 9?
Yeah, no, they're great.
That is crazy.
No, they're good kids. I haven't had class at Eastdale I don't like in a long time.
Really?
Oh, really? So you had...
Like,
You know what the class is like?
last year's 12s, when they were in grade 9, I legitimately hated them.
Oh.
No, they were awful. They were mean. That's really the only thing I can't handle. I can handle rambunctious. I can handle weak. I can handle strong. I can handle whatever. I don't do well with mean. Like, if people aren't kind to each other, that really ruins my day. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you have to spend all day with people, and spending all day with people. And that group, and it was funny because they were like, a lot of kids I really like a lot of kids I formed good relationships. There was something about them in that grade 9 year. They just were not kind to each other. They had kind of a bad attitudes. And I did not enjoy teaching them. And the year before them were the same. It was like 2 years in a row of like grade 9 classes where like, and I had one of those years, I had 3 grade 9 classes in a row for a semester. And I woke up every day and was like, I desperately do not want to go to my job. It was like the only semester of my career I felt that way. But mostly I've had classes I love. I'm lucky. I'm a lucky guy. No. And it's honestly, this is the weirdest thing. It was honestly like, if you sat me down with a list of the kids I taught in that class, I'd be like, love that kid, 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 hated this class. It's the weirdest thing, but they were just a bad combination, and they hadn't figured out how to be their best. The better angels of their nature hadn't perched themselves on their shoulders yet. They just really hadn't figured out how to like not be, because we can all acknowledge that like somewhere between grade 6 and grade 8, you're the worst human being you'll ever be. Right? Somewhere in that span, you hit your absolute nadir, right? You know that, right? Like, you've already been the worst person you're ever going to be, so it's good. You're only uphill from here. It is. Kids are mean. Kids are mean to each other. And the nice thing about teaching high school, most of the time, most of the kids are through that. They're done with it. And then every once in a while, you get a group where, like, there's just enough kids who aren't through the mean stage yet that they don't know how to be nice to each other. And it sucks. It's really unpleasant because I guess I'm a little empathetic by nature, and I just don't like watching people feel unhappy. And yeah, like when you got mean kids, like, I don't know, it's very unhappy. Didn't care for it. Anyway, here we go. All right. So like, what do we end up with here? These are haploid. And what's that word mean again? One copy of each chromosome. That's right. And again, it doesn't mean they only have one necessarily. How many would our haploid cells have? Your regular body cells, what we call your somatic cells, have 46 chromosomes, and your sex cells have 23. Good. So they're haploid, and the other way we say that sometimes is just 1N. They have one of each chromosome. Now, in an actual human cell, it would look like, and I'm not going to go full human. I'm not going to draw 46 chromosomes here because I'm not crazy. But it would look, if the parent cell had 8 chromosomes, if that was a diploid parent, as it went through meiosis 1, what would we get here? So this is the parent cell. And now when we go through meiosis 1, the first step, what happens? How many cells does 1 turn into in the first step here, meiosis 1? We drew all the stages. I'm not going to draw prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase again. But at the end of meiosis 1, how many cells do we have? 2. Okay? And those 2 cells, do they also have 8 chromosomes? How many will they have each? 4. They're going to have a copy of chromosome 1. And maybe this one ended up with mom's chromosome 1, and this one ended up with dad's chromosome 1. Maybe this one ended up with dad's chromosome 2. And this one actually ended up with mom's chromosome 2. Does that make sense? That's random. Whether you get mom's chromosome 1 or dad's chromosome 1 is random in each of these. Maybe here again, we get mom's for the other two. Maybe it worked out like that. That's fine. Which means down here we'd get dad's for the other two. There we go. So this is diploid, and it's duplicated. How would we describe duplicated? How do we describe the cells we get at the end of meiosis 1? Diploid or haploid? Haploid, good, because they have only one of each copy. And duplicated or not? Yeah, they're still duplicated, which means we only have one of each chromosome, but each is still stapled to a copy of itself. What do we end up with after meiosis 2? How many cells do we have now? Sorry? Yeah, we end up with 4. This 1 becomes 2, and this 1 becomes 2. And it's important to remember that however we went from here, because here, if blue is mum, how many chromosomes did we get from mum here? Just 1, right? How many did we get from dad? 3 in this particular case. That's random, by the way. It's not always the case. And then down here, obviously, if chromosome 1 is from mum up there, then down here, chromosome 1 is going to be from dad. And then chromosome 2 will be from mum in both these. Chromosome 3 will be from mum, and chromosome 4. And these are haploid, and they're not duplicated. All right, we've split those duplicates in half. Tomorrow we'll talk a little bit more about this, but I want to leave it there. That's lost stuff. That's phone away. You, phone away. But again, do I want you to know the steps of this? Yeah, I do. Do I want you to know your metaphase 2s from this? But really, this is just meiosis twice, and there's only one place where anything different happens. In this whole thing, where we do prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, get 2 cells, and then those go through prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, and become 4, there's only one place where anything is different from mitosis. Where is it? Anaphase which one? Anaphase 1. What happens here that doesn't happen in mitosis? The chromosomes don't split, and instead, one copy of each chromosome goes to one pole, and one copy of each chromosome goes to the other pole. So we're just going to make a quick note about that, and we'll be done, which is that meiosis is basically mitosis twice. And we'll say the only difference happens in anaphase 1. And this is where the chromosomes don't split. Instead, half, and we'll say 1 through 23, go to one pole, and half, also 1 through 23, so it's not like a random half. You get one copy of each, go to the other pole. And which copy of each chromosome goes is random. And when I say which copy, I mean maternal. What's that word mean again? From your biological mother. Or what's the other option? Paternal. From pater, which is Latin for father, and matra, which is Latin for mother. Which copy is sent to each pole is random. So, here's a piece of homework for you. How many unique sperm cells can be produced from 2 by 23 chromosomes being divided randomly. In other words, what are the odds that, like, you could have a brother, I could have a brother born 8 years after me, and he'd be me exactly because he got all the same chromosomes from dad and all the same chromosomes from mom. Is that very likely? Are you sure? How many possible combinations can you get? This is a little piece of homework for you, a little math question. You have 23 chromosomes that you have to take to the left side of the cell. But for every one of those, you have two choices, the one from mom or the one from dad. How many different sperm cells could you make from that? And then a follow-up question, how many sperm cells does a man make in his life? Will he ever make a double? Sorry? Yeah, because I just asked you to. And a good follow-up question to that, how many ova is in female body? Because we said you have all the ova you're ever going to produce. And a follow-up question, how many will ever be released in your lifetime? Typically, how frequently, and there is massive variation in this number, all right? We say there's a regular cycle, but of course, there's huge variations in that. They're wildly distributed across normal. But if you go to the doctor and they have the poster on the wall, how frequently does a woman ovulate, release an ovum? Yeah, they say roughly on a lunar cycle, right? Roughly once every 28 days. Again, your cycle may vary dramatically. Some women have cycles as frequently as every 14 or 15 days. Some women have cycles that last as long as 30, 40, or 50 days. And some women have cycles that are consistent and you could you could set your calendar to them. And some women's cycles are all over the place. And all of that falls completely within the realm of normal. So having said that, if on average, a woman releases an ovum every 28 days for her fertile lifespan, which is from, again, in Canada right now, most women, I think, will begin ovulating in your generation between like 12 and 13. It's quite young by historical standards. When do most women go through menopause? 40 to 50? Yeah, it depends. My wife had a client once who had a baby at 47. It's very old to be having a baby. That's got to be hard on your body. They finally done away with it. When my wife had her last baby, she had just turned 35. And do you know what they classified her pregnancy? You cannot believe the word they use. It is geriatric. Isn't that horrifying? She was 35 and she was referred to as a geriatric mother. Isn't that horrifying? You know what geriatric means? It means like old. Like that's like a geriatric home is like what you call an old folks home. Can you believe that that's the word they use? So they finally, just in the last couple of years, have taken that word out of the medical textbooks and replaced it with just advanced maternal age, which still kind of sucks, but is better than geriatric. Yeah. No, uncool.
What do I do if I'm getting this?
Guys, answer